Hey, so if you've been playing around with Hasura at all, I'm sure you've been really impressed by just how easy it is to get up and running quickly. You can just kind of plug in your database, whether it's Postgres or something else, and expose a GraphQL API to your mobile or web front end in just a few minutes. One thing Hasura doesn't do for you out of the box is auth. So I was thinking today I'd just run through implementing basic email password auth with Firebase Authentication, because it's something you'll likely have to do if you're building an app with Asura. So we might come back at some point to build this app out further into something, whether it's like a social networking app or something more ambitious. But today, I think we'll just stick with auth and see how far we get. We're going to spend some time in Figma just to start off, but after that, we'll move on to Firebase, Hasura, and VS Code. Okay. So the first thing we've done is we've just gone over to colors.co and picked out a color palette. The purple end of the color spectrum is kind of like my favorite place to be. So I picked out one that has kind of a deep dark purple bent, but also gives us this nice icy blue to do accents and highlights and that sort of thing. Okay, so with that, we can head back to Figma and mock up our login screen. I'm pretty happy with this design. I went ahead and created a sign up screen as well. I think that's the one we'll be working with just specifically today. So we've got this kind of eggplant purple background with this icy blue accent color. I pulled in some pre-built material UI inputs because they're easy and they look fairly tasteful. So this is the design we'll be going with. And now I think we're at a point where we can dive in and start writing some code. Okay, so the first thing we've done is just create an Expo app, and you can see we've got it running in the simulator over to the right. And now I think I'm just gonna put together a component for the sign up screen. I've also created a home component, which will display if the user's authenticated successfully. Right now, we're just going to use React use state. No need to reach for a more complex state management solution at this stage. For now, we're just going to go ahead and put together the UI for our signup component. We've got our 3 input fields here, and the reason we were able to do that so quickly is because we brought in React Native Paper, which is a really handy kind of material-oriented UI library. So the last thing we need to do is just add a button here that the user can tap to sign up, and then I think we'll be ready to move on to the rest of the stack for our auth implementation. I think we're in a good place with UI here. One of the things I really love about Figma is how easy it makes it to just kind of like map all of your colors, your dimensions, etc. Really everything you need from a design tool right into your code base. So we've got something kind of approximating our Figma mockup in the UI already. I left a couple of details out, but just in the interest of time. to get something workable, this is what we have. So now I think we're at the point where we can go over to Firebase and just get our auth infrastructure set up. And after that, we'll head over to Hasura, and that'll be kind of the last bit of infrastructure that we'll need to put in place. And then we'll kind of tie everything together and get the implementation working. But I'm out of coffee. So I think it's about time to take a break, maybe go for a run, and I'll be back in a couple of hours to pick this back up. Okay, we are back. So let's go ahead and set up the Firebase side of our authentication infrastructure. And what I'm going to do is just head over to Firebase, create a new project, and then write and deploy a cloud function that sets the custom claims on the JWT that Firebase generates for us, so that Hasura has what it needs to authenticate our user. I just deployed our cloud function, and I'll just walk through and explain it quickly. So basically what's happening is we're listening for the sign up event in Firebase. And when that happens, Firebase gives us back a token. But the first time that Firebase does that, the token have the custom claims that Hasura is expecting. So we just set them here so that going forward, the token meets Hasura's requirements. Now that I've got the Firebase part of the implementation set up, we can actually move on to Hasura. And this part is relatively easy. All we're going to do is create a project on Hasura and set a couple of environment variables, and then maybe create a table. And that's all we need to do. Okay, let's do it. We've set the Hasura GraphQL JWT secret environment variable, and we've just specified a few standard fields here. The one we want to pay attention to is the audience field. And we've just passed in our Firebase project ID. And the reason we do that is because Firebase shares JWTs with multiple tenants. So by specifying the audience field in the Hasura configuration, we make sure that Hasura checks the audience claim when it's validating the JWT sent over from Firebase. The last thing I've done here in Hasura is just create a users table. So users will have a primary key of ID and then a single text field for their email. But that's the last thing we actually have to do on the Hasura front. So now that we've got that in place, we can go back into VS Code and start wiring everything together. We've got Firebase all set up at this point, and I'll just kind of walk you through what we've done here. So we've pulled down the Firebase npm package and just configured our project here. So these are values we just grabbed from our project settings in Firebase. We've written an auth service here that just exports a few functions for creating a user, signing in and signing out. And then in app.tsx, we've added some code in useEffects to listen for changes in the user's auth state and grab the user's ID token and kind of inspect it to see if our Hasura claim is there. So basically, when auth state changes here, we grab the token from the user that Firebase returns to us, and we check to see if the Hasura claim is present. And it likely won't be the first time this fires because our cloud function it's kind of a race condition. It may or may not have finished executing. So if we do find the Hasura claim there, we'll just log it to the console for now. We'll do something else with it later. But if it's not there, we just grab the reference to our newly created user in the database. We'll execute this logic down below here. We force a refresh of the user to grab the latest token. And at that point, the Hasura token should be there because our cloud function will have finished executing and it will have updated the user in the database. And so we just log into the console. So this should work. If we run it here, we'll create a user with email test@test.com. We'll put in a password. There's no validation on this form for now. But let's see what this looks like in the terminal. Awesome. So you can see we've got our Hasura claim here as expected. And then if we toggle over to Firebase, refresh, there's our user. Cool. So now at this point, the last kind of big outstanding piece here is some networking code to actually interact with our Hasura backend. And because I think I want to return to this app later and actually build out some real features, I'm going to wire up Redux Toolkit and RTK Query, which is the stack I typically like working with. I'll also be using GraphQL CodeGen to generate queries that we can use to interact with Hasura. And if you're interested in learning more about that, I have another video on exactly that subject, which I'll link to in the description below. But for now, I'll just kind of like speed through it. So this actually ended up coming together a little quicker than I expected, but I'll just walk you through kind of how this is organized. Essentially, what we've done here is create a slice and specified an action in which we set the Hasura user ID and authorization headers on our clients once we get the response from Firebase. So going back over to, I've also moved this Firebase code over to a child component of app.tsx because we have some Redux stuff in here and that needs to be nested within a provider. So anyhow, right here where we were just logging the payload from Firebase to the console, we're now dispatching this action to our auth slice. Our auth slice sets the header on our clients, and then you can see here that if our auth state is authenticated, we display the home screen, and if we're not authenticated, we display the sign up screen. And from here, since we're authenticated and there aren't any special permissions set on our user table, we can do things like query our Hasura database and display the results. So we can just see what that looks like now. Oh, so one important thing we did have to do in Hasura is go into the permissions tab on our users table here. And in this select column here, we just needed to make sure that anyone with the user role had access to the ID and email columns of this table. But with that out of the way, as you can see here in the simulator, we're actually able to make queries into our Hasura database using our authenticated user now. And I'll just show you what I've done in the component here. All I'm doing is displaying the stringified JSON of the data that's coming back from our get users query here. But at this point, I think we've achieved the full intended scope of this video. So we were able to authenticate our user with Firebase. Firebase gives us back our JWT. We set the claims that Hasura will need to authenticate our user, and now we're making queries into the Hasura database. So I hope this video was helpful if you happen to be using Hasura for your database and you decide to choose Firebase for your authentication provider. I know there are other great options out there. Auth0 is one, for example. But I think that's about it. Let me know what you think in the comments of this video, what subjects you might like to see me cover in the future, and I'll see you in another video soon.